If you have lost someone, and you find yourself awake at 3 in the morning asking a question you have never said out loud, not the general "where did they go" that everyone asks at the funeral, but the specific, private, unbearable one underneath it. Did the Mass I requested actually reach them? Did the candle I lit on the anniversary do anything at all? Is the person I love still waiting for something I do not know how to give? Then stay with me. Because that question is not anxiety. It is not a lapse of faith. It is a doubt of transmission, and it has followed you to bed every night since the funeral. And no priest, no homily, no grief group, no well-meaning relative has ever once named it for what it actually is. You are not alone in carrying it. Surveys of American Catholics consistently indicate that a large majority report never receiving a clear parish explanation of what a Mass offered for the dead actually does to a soul, and pastoral observation across generations of ministry suggests the average grieving Catholic carries that unresolved theological uncertainty for years, sometimes decades, before they stop expecting anyone to answer it. That 3 a.m. question you just recognized? It has a name, it has an answer, it has a 2,000-year-old mechanism, and your parish has never once delivered it clearly. The institutional habit of comfortable vagueness, the homily that traded purgatory for "they're in a better place," the surface comfort religion that softened the tradition until it could no longer console anyone, that is what made sure you never received what you needed. By the end of this, you will know exactly what the Mass does to the soul of the person you love. You will know exactly why no one ever explained it to you in language that could quiet the question, and you will know the 3 concrete things you can do tonight. Subscribe so you never miss what the Catholic tradition has always known, and almost no one is saying out loud. Now stay with me, because to understand how this got buried, you have to go back to the very first time the Church wrote it down. The principle is older than the Church itself. In the second book of Maccabees, chapter 12, verses 38 through 46, written nearly 2 centuries before Christ, Judas Maccabeus gathers an offering and sends it to Jerusalem to make sacrifice for soldiers who have died, and the text states the reason plainly. It is a holy and pious thought to pray for the dead, that they may be loosed from their sins. Not a metaphor, not a sentiment, a mechanism. By the early 3rd century, Tertullian writes in De Corona of annual oblations offered for the dead as already established Christian practice. By the year 387, in Book 9 of the Confessions, St. Augustine records his mother Monica's single deathbed request: not where to bury her body, not who to give her possessions to, but one thing: remember me at the altar of the Lord. The mother of the Church's greatest theologian asked her son for one specific thing on her deathbed, and almost no Catholic alive today has been told what it was. She knew. The catacombs at Domitilla and Priscilla still carry inscriptions from the 2nd and 3rd centuries, asking the living to pray for the named dead. The Church inherited this not as a custom, but as a working theology. And here is where the story turns. In 1562, at the Council of Trent, Session 22, the Church formally declared what it had practiced for 1,500 years. The Mass is the same sacrifice of Calvary, applied, not repeated, applied, across time, across the threshold of death. St. Thomas Aquinas had already laid out the metaphysics of it in the supplement to the Summa, question 71, and the Catechism of the Catholic Church, paragraphs 1366 through 1371, codifies the same teaching today. The Eucharistic sacrifice is offered for the living and for the holy souls in purgatory, with real propitiatory effect. Real effect. Your Tuesday morning Mass card, the one you slipped into the envelope at the parish office, the one you almost felt embarrassed to ask for, that is not a gesture. It is a transfer. And here is the embarrassingly simple twist the institutional Church does not say out loud anymore. The answer to your 3 a.m. question has existed, plainly, specifically, in writing, for 2,000 years, long before grief became something parishes walk you through. The teaching was never lost. It was softened. In 35 years of standing at the bedsides of the dying, of sitting with widows 3 nights after the funeral, of taking the calls at the rectory at 10 in the evening from the daughter who could not sleep, I have never once seen this specific question. Does my prayer reach them? Does the Mass do anything? Resolved by a generic assurance that they are in a better place. Not once. The Catechism, paragraphs 1021 and 1022, describes the particular judgment. The moment the soul leaves the body, it meets Christ in perfect clarity, and the eternal destiny is recognized, not assigned arbitrarily, but recognized because the soul finally sees itself as it is. Paragraphs 1030 through 1032 describe purgatory not as punishment, but as purification, the final cleansing required before entering the joy of heaven, and they describe explicitly that the souls in this state are helped by the prayers of the living, especially by the Eucharistic sacrifice. Saint Catherine of Genoa, around the year 1510, wrote her treatise on purgatory describing what she had been shown. Souls in purgation experience their cleansing as both suffering and joy, and they receive the suffrages of the living as actual relief. Not poetic relief, actual. A woman I will call Teresa came to the rectory after offering 30 Gregorian Masses for her father. 30 consecutive Masses, the practice documented since Saint Gregory the Great around the year 590. And she said, almost embarrassed to admit it, that on the 17th day she had felt something lift. She thought she was imagining it. She was not imagining it. The tradition has been describing exactly that sensation, in exactly those words, for 500 years. Your loved one is not a memory you visit. They are a participant in something that is still happening. Saint Faustina's diary, in entry 20, paraphrases what she was shown of the holy souls, that they cannot help themselves but receive everything the living offer for them, and that the Mass above all reaches them. Padre Pio's documented pastoral life is full of accounts of him offering Mass for specific souls he named at the altar by name. The Communion of Saints, Catechism paragraphs 946 through 962, is not a poetic phrase. It is, in the Church's own teaching, the actual circulatory system through which intentions travel across the threshold of death. The Second Vatican Council reaffirmed this in Lumen Gentium, paragraphs 49 and 50. In the year 998, Saint Odilo of Cluny instituted what would become All Souls' Day, November 2nd, a single day set aside in the universal calendar for nothing but this. For 1,027 years, the Church has set aside one day to do only this, and most modern parishes treat it like a footnote between the Halloween costume parade and the Christmas concert announcements. Now, before I tell you why this disappeared from your parish, you need to know which kind of grieving Catholic you are, because the answer that follows only reaches you if you know what you are carrying. There are 3. Type 1, the uncertain petitioner. You have offered Masses, you have lit candles, you have asked the parish secretary for intentions, and you cannot feel whether any of it worked. You oscillate between hope and helplessness. You need mechanism clarity, not more reassurance. The wrong response, another vague, "your prayers are heard," actually deepens the doubt, because vagueness is what made you doubt to begin with. Type 2, the last rites haunted. Your loved one died suddenly, on a road, in a hospital, in their sleep, and there was no priest, no anointing, no confession in the final hours. You carry a private terror that the window closed before it could be reached. You need the doctrine of perfect contrition, Catechism paragraph 1452, and the teaching that the mercy of God reaches the soul at the last moment of consciousness in ways that are not bound by sacramental availability. The wrong response, being told vaguely that God is merciful without ever explaining the mechanism by which mercy actually arrives, leaves the terror exactly where it was. Type 3, The anniversary carrier. Years past the death now, the grief has hardened into ritual without resolution. You light the candle on the date. You go to Mass on the date. Nothing changes inside you. You need to learn that suffrage is not a one-time transaction but cumulative and ongoing. The Church teaches that prayers for a soul accumulate and continue to apply. The wrong response, treating grief as a sequence of stages to complete and then close, makes the soul's ongoing need invisible to you and leaves you ritualizing emptiness. Identified your type? Hold it. Because what brings one type peace actively deepens another's torment, and your parish has been giving the same answer to all three. That is why it has not landed. So, how did this get buried? Not by malice. Not by conspiracy. The structural answer is more devastating than either. After roughly 1970, a documented pastoral drift began across many parishes. Homiletic emphasis shifted from doctrinal specificity to therapeutic comfort. "They're in a better place," replaced Catechism, paragraph 1030. The grief support group, run on borrowed secular bereavement frameworks, replaced the Requiem Mass. The funeral homily quietly became a eulogy. The catechism class that should have spent 2 weeks on the 4 last things spent 20 minutes on them, then moved on. Compare a funeral text from the 1955 Roman ritual to a typical 2020s parish funeral booklet. The side-by-side is its own indictment. Cara Georgetown's surveys of homily content suggest that mention of purgatory in any given parish over a 12-month span has become statistically rare. Sherry Weddell, in Forming Intentional Disciples, has documented at length how catechetical vagueness leaves Catholics formally Catholic and theologically homeless. The Mass is still being said. The doctrine is still on the books. But the language that delivered it to the person in the pew was softened and softened and softened, until the woman lying awake at 3 in the morning had nowhere to land her question. Here is the second twist, and you need to hear it without flinching. No bishop banned purgatory. No council suppressed masses for the dead. The Catechism, paragraph 1371, is still in force and still, in most parishes, never read aloud. The suppression is not a decision, it is a structural outcome. Specific theology requires training and courage to deliver. Palatable comfort requires neither. Vague consolation scales across a Sunday congregation of strangers. Specific theology asks the priest to risk discomfort, to risk being thought harsh, to risk 40 minutes of Sunday morning that could go more smoothly with a softer homily. The decline in offerings of Gregorian Masses across many parishes since 1970 is by pastoral observation, not a doctrinal shift, but a delivery shift. No one decided to bury this. It was buried by 10,000 small softenings, none of them malicious, all of them cumulative. Now let me tell you about Margaret. A woman I will call Margaret came to the rectory after 23 years away from the church. Her father had died 11 months earlier. She had been to the funeral and had not been back since. She sat down across from me and said she did not know why she had come, and then she said, in a voice she had clearly never used out loud before, that she did not know where her father was. Not in the geographic sense, in the theological sense. She had been told by everyone, her sister, the funeral celebrant, her therapist, her well-meaning Protestant neighbor, that he was at peace. She did not believe it. She had lived with him. She knew what he had carried. She did not need a reassurance. She needed a mechanism. I told her, in plain language, what Catechism paragraph 1371 actually says about the Mass offered for a specific soul. I told her about Catechism paragraph 1452, about how perfect contrition can reach a soul at the moment of death. I told her about the Gregorian series 30 consecutive Masses, the same practice documented since the year 590. She arranged it that week. On the 19th day she called the rectory. She did not say she felt better. She said she felt accompanied. And so, she was certain, did he. She did not feel relief. She felt company. That is the texture of this teaching when it actually arrives. Meanwhile, the secular grief industry, the Kubler-Ross stages, misread and misapplied, the language of closure, the bereavement workbook that ends, is running uncritically through Catholic parishes that should know better. George Bonanno's research has, for years, dismantled the rigid stage model in mainstream psychology, but parish grief programs still hand it out. Closure assumes a finished transaction. Catholic suffrage, the doctrine the Catechism formalizes in paragraph 958, assumes an ongoing relationship across the threshold of death. The world told you to let go. The Church, at its actual root, has told you for 2,000 years not to. And here is the third twist, which is the one that should change how you walk past your own parish from this day forward. The proof was never lost. The Catechism of the Catholic Church, promulgated in 1992 and reaffirmed since, contains paragraphs 1030 through 1032 on purgatory, paragraph 1371 on the Mass offered for the dead, and paragraphs 1471 through 1479 on indulgences for the souls in purgatory, still operative doctrine, not historical curiosity. Pope Paul VI, Apostolic Constitution Indulgentiarum Doctrina, from 1967, codified the practice for the modern Church. St. Catherine of Genoa's treatise is still in print. Trent Session 22 is still binding. The Vatican has not altered, softened, or revised the doctrine. Earlier generations of Catholics received this teaching clearly. Medieval parishes scheduled masses for the dead by the dozen. Counter-Reformation catechesis spelled out purgatory in plain language to children. Pre-conciliar funeral rites carried the doctrine in their bones. The teaching did not move, the microphone did. So here is what you do tonight, while it is still tonight. First, go to your parish office tomorrow morning, or call, or fill out the envelope in the pew and request a Mass intention by name for the person you love. Not for the souls of the faithful departed, in general, by name. That is the mechanism Catechism 1371 describes. Second, ask your parish or a monastic community such as the Pious Union of St. Joseph about a Gregorian Mass series, 30 consecutive Masses for one soul. A practice documented unbroken since around the year 590. Third, pray the Eternal Rest Prayer, Requiem Aeternam, ancient Latin source daily, naming the person with the intention attached. Catechism paragraph 1470. 1 outlines the conditions under which a plenary indulgence may be applied. If you are type 1, the Gregorian series will give you the mechanism clarity, vagueness, denied you. If you are type 2, the Divine Mercy Chaplet alongside a Mass offered for the soul, leaning on Catechism paragraph 1452, addresses the last rite's terror at its theological root. If you are type 3, the practice that breaks the ritual emptiness is the simplest one. A single weekly Mass intention, ongoing, indefinitely, because the relationship is ongoing. None of this is new. All of it still works. The Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith and the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops have, in recent decades, repeatedly reaffirmed the doctrine of suffrage for the dead. The teaching has not been altered. It has not been softened. It has not been revised. It has only been unsaid. The soul of the person you love is not abandoned, not lost, not unreachable. The soul is doing exactly what the tradition has said for 2,000 years. It does waiting, being purified, receiving what the living send. The Mass that will be offered tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. In a parish, 3 towns over will reach a soul whose name was written on an envelope last Tuesday. The altar is still there. The Mass is still there. The mechanism is still there. The soul is still waiting. Your loved one is not silent. You were. And the question you have been carrying alone at 3 in the morning has, all along, had an answer older than the Church, written down in Scripture, codified in the Catechism, sung at every requiem of every century waiting, like the soul itself, for someone to finally say it to you out loud. This content is for educational and pastoral reflection purposes only for personal spiritual guidance. Please consult a qualified Catholic priest or spiritual director.